have a guest talk from Tianye, and his topic is Kroŋ, the Sinitic wanderings of an Austroasiatic world. And Tianye is a PhD student from Peking University, and also he is a visiting student at Trinity this academic year. His research interest is Old Chinese phonology and its contacts with neighboring language. So now let's welcome Tianye.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for Jinqi's introduction and Professor Hill's invitation. And my talk today will be Kroŋ, Sinitic wanderings of an Austroasiatic word. And first, I will discuss this topic from a very uncommon word or character recorded in Guǎngyùn, the Middle Chinese dictionary. This character is we will call here as Long. And actually, this character records three different words according to Guǎngyùn. The first word, which can be pronounced as Long in Mandarin, and its definition is a verb means to soak, or it can be the appearance of raindrops. And the second word recording by this character can be pronounced as Lang. It is the southerner's names for turbulence, and it is also a proper name, which is a Zhou administrative division in Lingnan, which is in nowadays Guangdong and Guangxi province. And the third word recorded by this character is a name of a river in Chenzhou. Chenzhou is also quite near of Lingnan. It's nowadays in the Hunan province, of southern part of Hunan province. And from the definition, we could know that the second word and the third word, which can be pronounced as Lang and Shuang, they are quite similar because they all record the word of a place name, whether a common name or a proper name. So we could see that the second one, the third one, they probably have the same etymology, and they are only the same in the writing records with the first one. So in this talk, we will focus on the second one and the third one. But interestingly, the second one, the third one, they all have something irregular in Middle Chinese. Let's see the second one. The word Lang. The irregularity of Lang is that the initial and the rhyme, they hardly combine to each other in Middle Chinese. The initial of this word is Lai Mu, which can be transliterated as L, and it is probably a lateral initial in Middle Chinese. And the rhyme is a division 2 rhyme, which means it cannot rhyme with division 1, division 3, or division 4 in Middle Chinese. The problem is that in Middle Chinese, the lateral initial Lai Mu and division 2 rhyme, they hardly combined. So why does this word Lang, they can't combine to each other? This is a problem we need to face. And let's move up to the next word of Shuang. This irregularity is the problem of the Xiesheng series. We know that in one Xiesheng series, the initials must have something similar in Old Chinese. And let's look at the Xiesheng series built on Long. And the vast majority of this Xiesheng series have the Middle Chinese initial Lai Mu, which means it is a lateral. And in Old Chinese, that should be something rhotic. And there's also some word named like Choŋ. It is, in Middle Chinese, it is a retroflexed aspirated stop, which is possibly from a voiceless rhotic in Old Chinese. And it shares some similarity with the majority of Lai Mu, which is from normal rhotic in Old Chinese. And we also have some special cases like Pang, which is probably from Old Chinese B and then R. But we should know that in some Tibeto-Burman languages, the word related to dragon, which is the basis of this Xiesheng series, has a B in the onset. For example, like some Zangla languages, it is probably like Brong. So this Pang in this Xiesheng series probably presents some early stage phonetic information of Long. So this is not irregularity at all. But the problem is Shuang. Why is Shuang, this word, is in this Xiesheng series? Because we know that Shuang is probably a retroflex fricative in Middle Chinese, which means it will probably come from Old Chinese S and R. But why Old Chinese S and R can be with the same Xiesheng series with a normal rhotic? This is out of order and it's irregular. So we need to figure out this problem later. So at this talk, I will first focus on the origin of lang and how this irregularity came. And then we'll focus on the origin of shuang and their irregularity. And from that, I will discuss about the doublet and etymology of both lang and shuang, and to see they are not have a non-Sino-Tibetan origin, and is possibly from Austroasiatic word. And the fourth part, I'll try to figure out the geographic distribution of these words from some Japanese documents. And the fifth part will be a summary. So let's move to the first part. And the first part, we will make a quick review to the irregularity of lang. We know that initial laimu, which is a lateral, cannot be combined with division 2 rhyme in Middle Chinese. And to discover this, I think we need to make a new review to both laimu and division 2 rhyme to focus on their development from Old Chinese to Middle Chinese. First, let's make a review of the division 2 rhymes. From the poems, the rhyming of poems, we could know that in Middle Chinese, division 2 rhymes, they only rhyme independently, which means only words in division 2 only can rhyme with words in division 2. This is the case of Middle Chinese. But in Old Chinese, the case is different. We know that division 2 rhymes could rhyme with other divisions, like division 1, division 3, or division 4. And so, if we want to do some reconstruction of division 2 in Middle Chinese and Old Chinese, we should to meet these things. That means that in Middle Chinese, division 2 should have a different main vowel from division 1, but in Old Chinese, they should have the same main vowel and the same coda, that they could rhyme with each other. Let's take two characters or two words for an example. One is gong, which is a division 1 word, and one is jiang, which is a division 2 word. And in Middle Chinese, they have a different main vowel, so they can't rhyme together. But in Old Chinese, they could rhyme together, so we should reconstruct the same main vowel and the same coda. So like in the very early stage of the Old Chinese reconstruction, Kroŋ reconstructed gong as K-U-N-G, gong, and jiang as K-U-N-G, but U with the hat. But this didn't meet with the rhyming because K-U-N-G and K-U-A-N-G with the hat could not rhyme together. And to make them could rhyme, Wang Li had introduced a new reconstruction which gave Old Chinese division 2 a medial of E, which makes them can rhyme together, and the E will assimilate the main vowel to make them can't rhyme together in Middle Chinese. And based on the retroflex of the initial and some changes in the main vowel, Li Fanggui changed Wang Li's E to a more rhotic R as their medial in Old Chinese. And this is well accepted, and we can see that in Baxter and Sagar's reconstruction, they also use this R to as the Old Chinese division 2 medial. And what about the initial of L, lateral in Middle Chinese? We know that in Middle Chinese L, it comes from Old Chinese rhotic R, and this is examined by like Plibank and Yahantov, and I will not talk about this too much. And we can see that both division 2 rhyme and lateral initial in Middle Chinese, they share something common, that they have something to do with a rhotic R in Old Chinese. So that, like Pan Wuyun said, at the same time, it can also explain why division 2 characters like an L, because the L cannot be followed by a medial L. That means that we have no RR in Old Chinese, so that we cannot have a combination of Middle Chinese lateral and division 2 rhymes. And this is the common explanation. But I have to say that this common explanation have two problems to face. One problem is how do we to explain some exceptions? Like we have long, this is lang. This is a combination of lateral and division 2 rhymes in Middle Chinese. So can we reconstruct something like RR-ONG, which is what Zheng Zhangfang reconstructed? I think it cannot, because it will violate the common phonotactic rule of Old Chinese. And secondly, if KRONG can become something like in division 1 in Middle Chinese, division 2 in Middle Chinese, and KONG will develop to division 1 in Middle Chinese, why this RONG will follow the root of division 1 instead of division 2? Because we know that division 2 rhyme their main vowel is assimilated by their medial R. And here, R-O-N-G, they also have an R. So why they are not assimilated by this R? This needs to be explained. So I think the best way is to review more on the sound changes of these two steps. The first step is the sound change of the initial part, which makes the Old Chinese rhotic to a Middle Chinese lateral. And second is what I call the independence of the division two rhymes, means that assimilation of this R of the main vowel. So let's first look at the stage of their sound changes when they happened. First is the initial part. We know that the research of the initial in Chinese is always very difficult, but luckily we could find some clues in the different translations of some Buddhist documents. At early 5th century, there are quite a few different translations of this Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Like in the earlier translation of Fa Xian, he translated the Sanskrit syllable Ra with a simple Luo without any note. And for the lateral La, he translated it as Luo with a note of soft or light, which means in Fa Xian's language, this Ra is rather not marked, but this La is marked. So it means Luo is more near Ra instead of La. But in some different state, maybe like 20 or 30 years later, in the translation of Dharmaksama, he translates this Ra with Luo at Kou, which this is probably means that this Luo is not existed in the Chinese language. And he translated the Sanskrit syllable La with this common Luo without any mark. So that means in the time of Dharmakshama, the Chinese word Luo is more similar to Sanskrit La instead of Ra. So from this, we could know that this rhotic to lateral sound change in Chinese probably happened between Fa Xian and Dharmakshama, which happened in the early 5th century. And what about the rhymes? We know that rhymes is more easy to discover because we can check the poems, their rhymings. So as Zhou Zunbo has stated that the division two rhymes of Qianyun system were not independent in Liu Song dynasty, while most of them became independent in the Qi and Liang dynasties, which constituted the most significant feature of rhyming in that period, which means that this sound change of the rhymes part will happen in the Qi and Liang dynasty, which is like late 5th century to like early 6th century. It is later than the former one of the initial part. So let's make a review of this Kroŋ, Rong, and Gong. So if this KRONG, they will not do anything with the initial part, so they will still remain KRONG, and they will do the second sound change of the vowel part, and they will become a division two rhyme in Middle Chinese. And as for this RONG, at first we'll do the rhotic to lateral sound change, and we'll make it like LONG. And then it will lack the rhotic R, so they will not follow the second part of the division two rhyme sound change, so it will become like LUWNG, which is division one in Middle Chinese, and will follow the same root of this KONG, and different from this KRONG, so that we could know that the actual explanation of why Middle Chinese lateral and division two rhymes can't combine together is that the result of the former sound change initial, which means the rhotic to lateral, block the condition of the latter sound change in rhyme. And this is the real explanation of why they cannot combine together. But let's look back of this exception of lang. Why this lang have this combination? We could see that lang is probably a dialectal word, and as a common name, it is a southerner's name for turbulence. And for a proper name, it is a name of a Zhouyin Lingnan, which is both at the very southern part of China in Middle times. And we know that in Middle Chinese, the so-called mainstream Chinese or lingua franca is some dialects mainly from like Luoyang and Jinling, which is like in the central part of China. And we know that the innovations will probably from this part and then spread to other parts, especially the remote part of China. So probably the southern part of China, their dialects have didn't share some common innovations from the mainstream Chinese or what we call like lingua franca. So if they have no letter innovation of this rhotic to lateral in some dialects in Lingnan, they will probably have to do this rhyme sound change as well. Like we could see that if this RONG will not do this rhotic to lateral, they will remain RONG when the sound change of the independence of division 2 rhymes occur, so that this RONG will become an RAEWNG, which is also a division 2 rhyme. And when this dialectal word was borrowed to mainstream Chinese, like in Guǎngyùn or Qieyun dialects, their R will be borrowed like from L, because there's no rhotic in like mainstream Chinese at that time. They will use a lateral to borrow this, and this will create a combination of lateral and division 2 rhyme. So we could know that this irregular of lang is actually a result of borrowing from dialect to dialect. And this is the first part of the origin of lang, and I hope I've made this clear. And then we'll come to the second part. We'll talk about the irregularity of shuang. We will make a quick review that this shuang have an irregularity because its initial is something like a fricative, shi, retroflex fricative, and it should not be in the same 谐声 theory with a lateral. But this, we have a clue for this lateral and this fricative, because we know that in some modern Chinese dialect, there's a phenomenon what we call the fricative L or fricative 来母, means 来母读擦音, and I will explain this later. So what is a fricative L, 来母读擦音? We know that the words with a lateral or 来母 in Middle Chinese are mostly pronounced with a lateral initial in most words in the vast majority of modern Chinese dialects. For example, I have two words. One is 龙, which means big, huge, or a sound of thunder. And the second one is also pronounced 龙 in Mandarin, which means death. And these two words, they all pronounced, their initial are all lateral in most Chinese dialects, such as Beijing, which is Mandarin, and Suzhou, which is Wu, Guangzhou, which is Cantonese, and Xiamen, which is a Minnan dialect. They all have the same lateral initial. But in some dialects, especially inland mid dialects, the case is different. Like we see that in Jian'ou, which is well discovered and examined by great Jerry Norman, and the word for 龙 has a lateral initial, but the word for death, 龙, has a very special S at the initial. So this happens mainly in some inland mid dialects, and we call it a fricative L because this is fricative. So how can we explain this? And we know that traditionally there are like three main explanations. The first one, I will take Jerry Norman as an example. He thinks that the normal L and the fricative L in inland mid dialects, they have two different origins. And the lateral L in mid dialects, they came from like proto-mid normal lateral, and it's from early Chinese will be a simple rhotic or a voiced stop at a rhotic. And the fricative L will come from like proto-mid voiceless lateral, and comes from early stage Chinese of a voiceless stop with an R rhotic. And this is the first explanation by Jerry Norman. The second one is like from Zheng Zhao Shangfang and maybe Sargar, that they think they are all came from the old Chinese R, but follow the different development route. The normal L came from like Middle Chinese lateral L and from Old Chinese rhotic R, and the fricative L is from a voiced fricative Z and from Old Chinese R. They all came from Old Chinese R, but they follow the different route. And the third explanation is by Wang Futang, and he thinks that these two, both fricative L and the normal L, they're all from Middle Chinese lateral L, and they have a different kind of root. And in traditional classification, we will call the first two, both Norman and Zheng Zhao Shangfang, they are of the primitive theory, because they believe that the fricative L comes from a very early stage of Chinese. And Wang Futang's theory will be called something like secondary theory, 后体说, because he believed that this fricative L comes from like Middle Chinese L. But I have to say that this is not, according to historical linguistic, I think Jerry Norman is more special. I will call Jerry Norman's theory the opposition theory, because he thinks that the lateral L and the fricative L, they're actually different from the very early stage of Chinese. But for Zheng Zhang Shangfeng and Wang Futang, they actually all believe that the fricative L has no independent origin or source, and they're all from the same source of Old Chinese or Middle Chinese. So I'll call them both like stratum theory. And I think this is they are actually quite same and quite different from Jerry Norman. And I'm not a mean expert, and I hope this can meet approval of mean experts. And what I believe is that I think Jerry Norman's theory is true, because we could find some correspondence of this fricative L and the normal L in many languages, such as Hmong-Mien and Kra-Tai, which are all some neighboring languages in southern China. And we could also find some other Min dialects. They have also the contrast between a fricative L and a normal L, but they are not based on their consonant, but they're on their consonant-tongue interaction. And we could also find their opposition or contrast in Waxianghua, which is also a very conservative dialect in China, which is in like southern part of Hunan province. So I believe that these two L, the fricative one and the normal one, they are different at a very early stage of Chinese. So like in Baxter and Sagar 2014, they have two different reconstructions. One, the normal L in Proto-Min came from Old Chinese rhotic R, and it's same as Middle Chinese will also be a lateral L. For the Proto-Min voiceless L will be the fricative L, and it came from Old Chinese voiceless stop plus an R, which is also Middle Chinese L. So can we put this back to the case of Shuang? I think the answer is yes. We could easily to reconstruct the Shuang as this kind of C, which means it's an unknown stop, plus a Rong in Old Chinese. And it follows three different roots in three different dialects, and to make the complex situation in Middle Chinese. We could see that in the development of the we call mainstream Chinese, or the ancestors of Qieyuan and Guǎngyùn system, this some C and Rong will have the neutralization with the simple RONG, and will become LONG, and will become a division 1 word, a division 1 rhyme word. But this word is actually disappeared in the Qieyuan dialect. And in the second one is probably the Lang we have discovered before, and it's also have the neutralization of CR and R in the very early stage. But for the third dialect, maybe it's a very remote dialect, the contracts between CR and R, they are not neutralized. And the CR will be fricative as a retroflex fricative as something like shi. And this SR will also assimilate the main vowel and will become like something like shuang in Middle Chinese Guǎngyùn dictionary. So this is the development of these three different dialects, and will make the doublets in Middle Chinese Guǎngyùn. And we could know that Min dialects, they have something very special, but it lacks very early systematic records, so that this shuang is probably the earliest documented fricative L in any Chinese dialects. And this actually sets a time limit for the related sound changes. So I think maybe this one will benefit for the further Min dialect discovery or investigation. And now we are going to talk about the third part. So what's the etymology of Long and Shuang? And the first part we want to talk about, we have already reconstructed this Lang and Shuang as some kind of CRONG in Old Chinese. So can we determine the true phonetic value of this pre-initial consonants of CR? So that's PR or KR or TR. Actually, we have two kinds of evidence. One is like internal evidence, which is we can find some words with the same root in Old Chinese. And second one is the external evidence. We will to see the possible loan words in other languages. I'll give some example which is mentioned in Baxter and Sagar's book. Like the internal evidence, I will take this word li, which is a kind of wild cat in China, to be an example. And in Middle Chinese, the initial of this is a lateral L, and in Proto-Min, it is a voiceless L, so that in Old Chinese or maybe early stage of some Proto-Chinese, it will become a CR. And we can see that in the Fangyan, this book, it mentioned of some doublets of this li, which concludes like lai, which is this R and a schwa, and also this B, which is this BR and a schwa. And this is li, which is unknown C and R and a schwa. So from this B, we could know that this word probably have something with a liberal in their initial part, so that we could reconstruct the li as a PR and a schwa. As for the external evidence, we could to check some like Proto-Tai and Hengmian languages, like this lu, this close. In Middle Chinese, the initial is L lateral, and in Proto-Min, it is a voiceless lateral, so that in Old Chinese, this should be some kind of CR. And we know that in Proto-Tai, there's a similar word is probably a long word, it's like PRAK, so that this the lu in Old Chinese will be reconstructed as PR. And 6 is something same in the case that Middle Chinese is L and Proto-Min is like LH, and Old Chinese should be CR. From Hengmian languages, we know that this is like KRUK, so in Old Chinese, we could reconstruct this as KR. So from internal evidence, can we find some doublets of this lang and shuang, so we can determine what this C is? I think the answer is yes. We know that if we have some kind of doublets, it will be probably like this CRONG without this dot, so that in Middle Chinese, it will become some division 2 word, some word in division 2 rhyme with a simple stop at the beginning. So can we find this? Yes. The answer is very simple. This is jiang, the word for river. And word for river and word for turbulence, they have doublets. And I think this is very common and it's very natural. And so we could say that this jiang and long, or lang or shuang, they are the doublet, and we will reconstruct this lang and shuang, their Old Chinese form as this K.RONG. And so what's the difference between jiang and long? Why they have their difference, and what's their etymology? And I could say that this is actually discovered like 50 years ago by Jerry Norman and Mei Zulin. They have argued that jiang is not native to Sino-Tibetan languages, but it's a loan word borrowed from Austroasiatic languages during the pre-Qin period. They still have some like cognates in modern day like Austroasiatic languages, like Vietnamese shuang and Sudan languages Kroŋ, etc. They have given out 3 main evidence. The first one is that the word for jiang, it was first used as a proper name for the Yangtze River in Chinese language, while its cognate in Austroasiatic languages is a common name for rivers. And in the loan words, it is always some common name and borrowed as a proper name. Like the case of the river in America, Mississippi, it is first in Native American languages just means river, but in English it means the certain river, and jiang is probably the same case. And the second evidence is that the word jiang Kroŋ appears quite late in Chinese literature, and they are not appeared in oracle bones, but only in Zhou bronze script texts, which means that in the Shang dynasty, probably the Chinese speakers are not contacted with the Austroasiatic speaking people, so they have not borrowed this word, so we could not find jiang. And only until like in Western Zhou dynasty, Chinese has expanded to like the Yangtze Basin, and they have made the Austroasiatic people, they have borrowed this word. And the third evidence is that the jiang was a southern regional word according to Kroŋ Yongda's note of Shangshu, which means this is actually some dialectal word which has located it in the southern part. And according to Norman and May, they have only give some like modern Austroasiatic cognate, because at that time there's no very good reconstruction of like Proto-Austroasiatic words. But we know that in nowadays, Austroasiatic languages are quite south in mainland Southeast Asia, and they are even not much in northern China. So what languages do Chinese people contact in like pre-Qin dynasty? And I think that is very difficult to discuss by modern languages. So the best thing to do is that we could focus on the reconstruction of like Proto-Austroasiatic languages. Like we see that the Austroasiatic languages, maybe they are very north of nowadays now. So we will first focus on Shorto's reconstruction. Shorto gives 3 different reconstructions for the word of channel and river. But very strange that he gave the word of a simple R for the initial instead of a KR. But so who is wrong? Is Shorto made some mistake, or Jerry Norman and Mei Zulin? I have to say that maybe we need to do some correction for Shorto's reconstruction. I'll give some evidence. First, we could see that in Shorto's word list, there are many words in the list have a K in the initial part. and such as Hmong, which is a void Hmong languages, or Old Hmong, which is a Monic language, and Bakhnar, or Kamic languages. And we could see that like Vietic, Bakhnar, Hmong, they are quite separated. So I think this is not a shared common innovation. And we could see that like the Monic languages, the Viet-like languages, and the Casic languages, they are also very separated in the classification of Austroasiatic languages. So we should say that this K is probably something preserved from the very old stage instead of shared innovation of the modern stage. So we should reconstruct this K back to Proto-Austroasiatic languages. And what's more, that we know that R is preserved in the majority of languages, and in blah blah languages, it is noted he, and in Vietnamese reflex, it is they, and properly written R, but in about 1/3 cases, we found GI, which is in Northern Vietnamese. This is what Shorter write about the correspondence between Austroasiatic languages. But we know that in Vietnamese, this is an S. And in Phác Lu's reconstruction of Proto-Vietnamese, we know that modern Vietnamese S, which pronounced as sh, comes from like ksh in like 17th century, and it's from kr, and from k stop with an r in like Proto-Vietnam Vietic. So that is probably not a simple r for this word. And so the word should be reconstructed with an initial of kr instead of a simple r. Luckily, we have a new reconstruction of Sidwell and Elvis, and they gave this word as two reconstruction. And one is a morphological and one is phonological, and they gave it very similar to like KRONG. And we think this is probably better than only an RONG. And now we face a new problem. Since this Long and Shuang and Jiang, they are all borrowed from the same Austroasiatic word. So how can we explain the difference of these two words? So we can see this is one is K with a dot, and this is a K without a dot. And actually, we have like two explanations. One is that it is a different violation of the same root in Proto-Austroasiatic. And one is that they are the same word in Proto-Austroasiatic, but they have a different borrowing from the same word. And I have to say that maybe the second one is much more possible, and it's much more interesting, but maybe controversial. I have to say that Sidwell and Elvis reconstruction, they gave two different reconstructions. One is a morphological word, and one is a phonological word. The morphological word means that it shows the deep structure, focusing on its morphological components, and the phonological word shows the surface structure, focusing more on its actual pronunciation. So we could see that if some Chinese speaker who is probably very familiar with the Austroasiatic words, he will probably borrow it from like the morphological word, like Kroŋ, and will simply borrow K as the initial, and R with medial, and ONG with as the vowel and coda. So he will borrow this word as the Old Chinese KRONG, and written this word in a character of 谐声 series built on gong, and will become the character of jiang. And if someone who is not very familiar with these Austroasiatic languages, he will probably just focus on the very surface of the phonological the system, and he will think that maybe this K with a schwa is something like a pre-initial or a pre-syllable, and this R is actually the initial of the main syllable. So he will probably borrow this word from Austroasiatic to Old Chinese as this K with a dot and RONG. So he will write this word in the character based on the 谐声 series of Long. So we'll have this word, this character of Lang and Shuang. And here's a new question: that why the Chinese speaker borrow this word, not K schwa with an RONG, but K with an RONG. We know that in Baxter and Sagar's reconstruction, actually there's a three-way contract or opposition, which is KRONG and K point RONG and K schwa point RONG. So why the Old Chinese speaker choose this one instead of this one? And I have to say that probably there's no contrast between a stop schwa with an R and a stop with an R in Old Chinese. The only example Baxter and Sagar give is this word luck, 落, means to drop down or fall down. He gave the reconstruction of this garak. They are based on some dialects, like in Xiamen dialect, the word is like galao, and in Pingyao dialect, the word is like gala. But I have to say that this is probably a fission reduplication of hua instead of luo, or this is a result of an analogy, because we know that in Jin dialect, Shanxi dialect, there's many words can be reduplicated as something like gele, something like that. So maybe they just use this word luo and make an analogy to make it like gala. So we could now use this to reconstruct something like garak in Old Chinese. And if we pass this, think this example is not true, then there will be no example for this gara in Old Chinese. So probably there's only this CR without this C schwa and R. So we know that this borrowing will be like two-way. One is from this morphological form, and one is from this phonological form. And this makes the difference of this jiang and shuang in Old Chinese. And now we'll move to the fourth part, and we'll talk about some geological distribution of this character long or shuang. Actually, we have like we know that in Guǎngyùn dictionary, it stated that this word is only a dialectal word in some southern parts. So we have like actually two loan words which is possible. First, we could guess that maybe this word is borrowed from Austroasiatic languages to Old Chinese and to some stage of like mainstream Chinese and to some southern dialects and other dialects. And in other dialects, this word is disappeared. And we can also say that maybe this word is only borrowed from Austroasiatic language to southern dialects and never borrowed to mainstream Chinese. This is also possible. And which one is more possible? And we could see that in like classical Chinese texts, we could never find a word like lang or shuang, which means a turbulence or a river in any documents. So probably the second one is more possible, but some Japanese text will give us some new clue. Although we could not find any example in early stage of Chinese text, we could find that in old Japanese texts, like the Manyu Shu, a collection of poems, we could find many appearances of this shuang, but it is recording the Japanese word taki. Like the earliest one is like in Manyu Shu, Book 1, Poem 36. It is right like Mina Payaki Takino Miyakoba, which means the capital by the waterfall with rapid water. And this taki is recording the word waterfall. And waterfall is probably developed from something like turbulence. And we know that this poem is written by Kakino Motono Hitomaru with around 1689 to 1691, which is like late 7th century. So where do Japanese know about this Chinese character? Can they learn it from like Qieyue and Guǎngyùn dictionary? I think the answer is no, because we know that Qieyue and Guǎngyùn was introduced to Japanese like late 8th century or even to 9th century. The first Japanese documents which mention the Qieyue is that this Zhuyu Shiki Rong Liu Gito Shou, which by the Japanese monk of Shin-ei, which is like 773, which is quite late than this poem. And the first Japanese adaptation of Qieyue is by the Japanese monk Ennin, which is like in the 9th century. So we know that Japanese could not borrow this character by the dictionary. So they could only borrow this character in some like more secular text, maybe from like business or something like that. And so where do Japanese borrow Chinese at that stage? We could learn that Japanese borrow some goon or wuyin from like southeastern China, like in the South and North dynasties. So we know that the Japanese borrow this word long from this southeast China, and it's quite different from Lingnan. So we know that probably this word long and shuang is actually also used by some people in southern East China rather than Lingnan. So in that case, we could know that which one is more correct by the root of the borrowing. I think the first one is more correct to mean the fact that Old Chinese borrowed the Austroasiatic word of Kroŋ as long or lang or shuang, and it also preserved in some stage of mainstream Chinese in some late Old Chinese or early Middle Chinese, and it's preserved in southern dialects even to a time of like Qieyun dictionary, and in other dialects it is probably reserved like to like 4th or 5th century and was borrowed by some Japanese users. And the last part is my conclusion. And first, we will make a brief review of the development of this Kroŋ. We know that in Proto-Austroasiatic languages, this Kroŋ has two forms. One is a morphological form, and one is the phonological form. And the two forms were borrowed to Old Chinese differently. And for the morphological form, it is borrowed as jiang, Kroŋ, and to Middle Chinese it's jiang, and to Mandarin it becomes jiang. And for the phonological form, it becomes like gerong in Old Chinese, and to Middle Chinese it becomes lang and shuang. And this one, the character, was also borrowed to Japanese to record their turbulence or waterfall word, taki. So this is the whole development of this word. We could see that they are borrowed like 2 times to Chinese. So I will say that this is a wandering word. And I have also some more further thoughts for like this research. The first one is that we should focus more on the dialectal information recorded in the Middle Chinese rhyme books or dictionaries. Like Spector was once discovered that in Qiyun, there's some definition to say that the Min people call the word water, 水, as 水. And actually this was represent the different development of Proto-Min, of this ST in Middle Chinese and Proto-Min. In Middle Chinese, it is a fricative xi, and in Proto-Min, it probably is zi, so it will be recorded in Middle Chinese dictionary as this 主 or 主 And the second one, I would want to talk more about loanwords in Old Chinese, which is what I am doing right now. And the first one is that Chinese has a long contact history with neighboring languages, so that many words they could not borrow once. Maybe they borrow twice or much more times, and it's not one direction borrowing. And maybe Chinese borrow it from other languages, and other languages borrow it from Chinese again. So we need to focus more on their doublets to know that the detail of their borrowing. And second is that we need to discuss more of the loanwords on the loanwords in Old Chinese, and to do some more integration of studies in different languages, such as Chinese and like Austroasiatic languages. And last part, I would like to say that my research had used some further research from like elder scholars like Alexander Volvin, Wang Futang, and Michael Fallu, and they are all passed away for the like past 3 years. I would like to show my respect to them. And that's all for my today's talk. Thank you. And it will be my honor to hear your comments and questions.